So tell me more about this tunnel.
We first glimpse, the first process is to understand how old this game is. And it has been going on for longer than human beings can fully comprehend in the aspect of time. We have consistently created new realms and planets and have consecutively inhabited them, and in each furtherment there is something new to be learned. It is not the same lesson to be learned. It is something new to be uncovered that furthers us as, I want to say people or species, but those aren't the correct words.
Okay.
But that is what it is.
Well, how did this get started?
There was a group that there was a group in the very beginning. It was not one. There were a few of them, many of them, not numerous, but many. And they felt empty inside. They felt nothing. And they wanted to feel something. And they began something that involved creating in their own image a group that is eternal, a group that does not have gender. They are a governing group. And this is a grand, never-ending experiment. There is it just goes so far back. That's all I'm seeing, is it just going from one group of people to the next, to the next, to the next, in ways that...
Was there a creator of this group?
I don't see a singular creator of the group. I see the group as its own. Perhaps 6 to 10 different entities.
And what was the experiment meant to do?
Perhaps they suffered a great loss.
What type of loss?
I feel like they were what was left, and they had the infinite ability to start again and to continue. And this is what has come from it. But there seemed like a deep melancholy to the group. It's not being done out of joy and happiness or malicious intent. It was done out of loss, out of need, out of the desire for company, for things to be done around them.
So what did they do
Perhaps
first?
maybe were they exiled from something larger?
Were they exiled?
There just seems to be a sadness that leads them to starting this domino effect of enlightened humans or creatures.
What did they hope to get out of that?
A recreation of what they once had, though we are still nowhere near.
What did they have before?
It seems like they didn't really have bodies at all. More of like a gaseous cloud of color. And from that, they express themselves.
From this cloud, they express themselves?
There seems to be like a cloud that can have different colors to it. And they could sense the colors, and they could communicate, and they could...
What colors?
Perhaps I see purples and blues, muted pastel colors. Some have gray to them and a little bit of yellow, but maybe I keep getting the sense that maybe they were rogue and were exiled, or they left, or perhaps they wanted to do this creation, this experiment, and they were not supported in it and went and did it anyway. And in that, this never-ending, unyielding figure eight of creation was created.
So when you get into the tunnel, are you able to see all this?
In different, they do it in different levels. They give you a little bit at first, and then have you leave, and you are sent to process that, and then you are allowed to go back and receive more if you feel that you would like to receive more. Not everybody chooses to receive more, but everyone has to go at least once.
Everyone has to go at least once?
It makes your cerebellum balance to a non-violent, non-hostile, non-confrontational balance. It removes from people insecurities in which we wage a majority of our wars and conflicts over.
Over the insecurity?
It is a defense mechanism for the planet to keep it from breaking out into all-out chaos. And as long as you are shown this information, you feel no need to continue this battle within yourself.
And why is that? Because your insecurity is removed?
You feel how connected you are in every aspect, because you realize that it was all created from one giant specific ball of light, maybe. I think it's probably a bit more complicated than that, but that's what it looks like.
So
that breaks itself down into creating everything around us and us. And that connectivity, you could feel it pulse through your body like you're being electrocuted, but it will not kill you. It will just shock sense into you, almost.
So it's almost like a shock, and you feel how connected you really are
to everyone around you, and you no longer feel the need to do harm or to judge or to compare.
Are you essentially everyone you see? Do you realize that? Is it that connected?
Yes, and then there is a great love that opens up for yourself first, and then for those you see around you. You can, after the first time, look at someone and you can see their struggles and what they go through, and the compassion that comes from it negates the fear you would have once had about these people, and it bands you together.
How many times have you gone into the tunnel?
7 times.
7 times.
And that is why I was chosen to go on the expedition to find more.
So now you're on this expedition, what did you find?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It would have seemed a failure at first glance, but I was meant to find nothing.
Why is that?
From this perspective, I can see how it plays out, and I was not meant to find more of this specific gem and mineral.
Why?
I was meant to begin a new colony.
Oh, and where
And
was this colony?
Where we are now. Not specifically where we are now, but in this planet.
So you found this planet?
This planet had been found, and it had been watched for quite a while. While we watched the development from amoeba to man take place with certain assistance.
Tell me more about this assistance. How did the process work?
Once the conditions were found on this planet that we understood would evolve into better conditions, the seeds were planted, single cell organisms were sprinkled into the different parts of the ocean. Though the ocean was vast at this time, there was very little land, and a majority of it was uninhabitable at the time. Very little oxygen as well in the ozone layer within it.
And how was more oxygen created or brought in, or how did that work?
Over time, there was a natural growth and progression. There was a continuous growth under the ocean for years and years and years. And there was a very deep element of evolution, but evolution always needs a push, a helping hand, perhaps.
And how is that done?
There is genetic modifications that could be made and implanted in certain organisms that will allow for a different reaction to happen in its next procreation.
And who does that?
There were many different scientists who had perfected this already. Many of the experiments were carried out on our home planet and then transferred over and brought as a laboratory to this one.
And how were they taken back and forth?
It's a very simple saline solution that would allow for the transfer of many of these organisms. It is the same solution that we are still created within. And the most important thing to know from the experiment is that evolution on its own is a very powerful force, but it can take quite a while. And all that was done was we took out a little while and sped it up in some circumstances.
Like which ones did you speed up?
After the earth had cooled and the land formations began, and it seems like there were very large trees everywhere, larger than anything you could truly imagine. After these started to sprout up, we went in and changed certain things within these little organisms, these tadpoles, if you will. And then the next generation suddenly had the ability to breathe outside of the water for a little while.
So they were injected with these new genes? Is that how it...
Like gene splicing, gene manipulation. Nothing that they didn't already have, just a little bit more advanced than what they had. And it wasn't for all of them. It was spread out and it was varied. And if you just give it enough time, it takes its own natural course with the helping hand, and it speeds it up a little bit.
So how did these scientists know how to do this?
It had been passed down through the subconscious collective memory, and unearthed as we figured, as we configured with, conferred with the other dimension, understood, something like that.
And how many beings were working on this project?
There was an entire agency, government agency, hundreds, thousands, perhaps.
Can you describe what these beings looked like?
The beings that we created, or the ones who were the creators?
The creators.
Very, very similar to how I looked. There was a tall, very pale skin, very, very lithe in appearance, very, very light features, and almost like giant Nordic individuals.
And how far away is your home planet from this planet?
If you were to go by miles, it would not be achievable to go. It would be so far. But if you were to use a dimension hop, a dimension hopper, a black hole, perhaps, a segue to that planet, it would not take long at all. It's a very quick journey using the right path.
Is that how you go back and forth?
The transport is the easiest part of the experiment.
The transport from your home planet to this planet?
But it is something you have to have the right conditions to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
It is very difficult to create the conditions and then manipulate the genes.
Mm-hmm.
The conditions must exist first for the gene manipulation to be effective.
And how are the conditions exactly created?
It is just the way it plays out in the creation. Some are habitable for some things, and some are habitable for others.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a great variance to this.
Mm-hmm.
You may look at a planet and think it is completely useless and void of life and resources, but it is only that for a human. For another, it could be a very specific place to continue their experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
So for our people, this was what we had sought out. We needed water,
Mm-hmm.
we needed salt, and we needed oxygen to eventually become part of this planet.
So the goal was to become part of this planet? In what way?
It is always a policy to have a backup planet
Mm-hmm.
in the event of the unthinkable.
And what is the unthinkable?
That there is no longer the ability to sustain our people in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not unfathomable. It is something we are doing right now
Mm-hmm.
as a people and continuing.
Mm-hmm. So this planet was your backup? Mm-hmm.
Our laboratory, our backup.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand at the time what I was being sent for,
Mm-hmm.
but it was to begin the colonization under the guise.
And how did you begin this colonization?
There was a deliberate malfunction on the ship,
Mm-hmm.
and we crashed sideways
Mm-hmm.
into a very hard type of rock
Mm-hmm.
in a place that has very dark, cold water,
Mm-hmm.
and our ship rolled into the water and remained under. We had never, but we were not prepared
You weren't prepared?
for the cold and for the trauma
Mm-hmm.
and for the crash. And some of us did not make it at all.
They didn't? What happened to them?
The impact broke their necks,
Mm-hmm.
snapped them,
Mm-hmm.
and they dangled there. It was terrifying,
It was terrifying for you?
and I had to stay calm. I had to lead them out of there, but they were not prepared. I was not prepared. We had to open the door as the water rushed in
Mm-hmm.
and pushed us back up against. I remember feeling the metal, the buttons, the things on the wall that drove the ship. I remember feeling it back up against me
So
as
you
I
could
was
feel it?
pushed into it from the water.
Mm-hmm. How did that feel?
It was freezing.
Mm-hmm. So you could feel the cold?
The cold was unmeasurable.
Mm-hmm.
It was frozen. And we were able to get out.
How did you get out?
I was able to open my eyes under the water after the initial shock,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to grab a few hands and we banded together as we had been taught in our extraction rituals, extraction regiment.
So you had practiced this?
We had practiced in our group how to get out, as if, particularly imagine if it was like an army training.
Okay.
And our basic training, it wasn't basic, our training kicked in and allowed for a few of us to swim out. There were 6 of us who got out.
There were 6 of you?
There were 2 who died on impact. And I think one of us died after they got out from hypothermia.
So what happened next?
We sat in shock, freezing and shivering, not knowing what to do.
Had you been told any of this in your training?
We were prepared for certain things, but we were not prepared for the cold and the water, and we had nothing with us to allow us to use our technology to survive. We did not know how to make fire, and we stayed this way for 2 days. After the shock initially wore off, we started to just travel together. We walked to not die.
You just walked to not die?
We walked to stay warm, to keep our bodies moving and our blood flowing. We walked and we walked, and there was great distress amongst everyone. Many didn't believe we would find anything, and we didn't know what we were looking for.
So you didn't know what you were looking for?
We didn't think there was anything to look for. And they started to turn on me.
How so? What did they do?
They wanted to die, and I wouldn't let them.
You wouldn't let them die?
And they didn't believe that there was anything worth continuing this journey for. And then we met a human being.
You met a human being?
She came out of nowhere.
What did she look like?
Very hairy, very primitive, a very light brown skin color, very light, dark, curly hair, a mess of it, a huge amount. And she was in shock when she saw us.
She was.
She had never seen anything that even looked or resembled like us.
What did she do?
She slowly started to back up as she saw us. She was gathering wood. And I fell on my knees and I begged her. And she seemed to understand from the gesture that we were not going to hurt her and we needed help. And she held her hand out with her palm out, opened, stretched out, as if to say, wait here. And we did. And not much longer, she came back with several people. A clan, a tribe, a group of others. Very primitive, very, very, very basic. Like the first barely man people.
When you say barely man, what do you mean by that? Did they have
There
different
was,
shaped head?
you could still see a little monkey in them. You could, a little ape, a little primate in their features.
Like how so?
The eyes, the cheeks, the ears, all still had that shape. The humped posture as well. The hairiness. They're very, very hairy.
So the hair was all over the body?
For the women, it was not as much on the face or on the chest, but on the arms and the legs heavily, and the head tremendously. Very big eyebrows that were all joined together, almost to the point where you really couldn't see a forehead with many of them. And they brought us to a fire.
They brought you to a fire.
And fed us. And we were so hungry.
What did they feed you?
It was a mash of roots that had been boiled. That had been boiled with some water. So kind of like a potato soup is the closest thing I could think of.
Was that it?
And it was like a mush, and you just ate it with your hands.
How did it taste to you?
It was bland, but it was the feeling, that emptiness, the filling of it, and we all got sick from it.
We did.
We did, but not because it was bad. I think we were just so hungry at that point that we couldn't hold it down, and we had to show them we were apologetic towards wasting this food.
Oh.
They were upset at first, thinking we did not like it. But we were just traumatized and starved.
And what happened next?
At first they were a little suspicious of us, not understanding. But after a while, they allowed for us to build our own little camp near theirs, but not with theirs. And then I began to spend time with the young woman who found us.
You did?
We could not understand each other, but we did understand sign language and body language and what we could create. There was a lot we could not say.
So you communicated through your body?
Yes.
And you spent a lot of time with her?
A lot of time. There was much to learn, and it was very lonely.
How did you feel with her?
It was a break from the constant struggle of figuring out what's next. It was a very peaceful little break, and it helped to focus, because it would allow me a distraction from this larger problem, and I could focus on something very simple and very basic in communicating with her.
And what was this larger problem?
What do we do? How do we get back home? How do we even get back to the ship? Are we just stuck here, or is this just a challenge for us to get back?
So what did you decide to do?
I see when the weather warmed, I tried to swim back underneath to the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not successful. I could not hold my breath long enough to get in there to get anything useful.
You couldn't.
But there was we realized there was no hope. There was no one coming back for us.
Mm-hmm.
There was no way to communicate, no way for them to even see a crash site.
Mm-hmm.
It was underwater. We were just stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And then we began to talk amongst ourselves as to how we would even continue. And we realized we were just going to have to assimilate and breed with them. And this was our new life.
Mm-hmm. How did that make you feel?
Horrible. Like I had let them all down.
You felt like you had let your other team members down?
Yeah. They were not... They said I had given up.
They said that you had given up?
And they were not interested in breeding with monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
And I explained to them so many times that this was the only way that we would continue our journey, is through assimilation and procreation.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not agree.
So what happened next?
I began to explain and show them that it could be done and we could be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the young woman that I befriended in the beginning who found us, I began to instigate a relationship with her. But it was not what they were used to.
It wasn't?
No. Theirs was more... It was rough. It was a lot rougher.
Mm-hmm.
You took what you wanted
Mm-hmm.
rather than asked.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not seen as a characteristic of something they wanted there.
Mm-hmm. So they didn't like how you approached that?
No. They would prefer, as a man, I be dominant. And it was not what we had understood in our upbringing from where we were from.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of an equality, of a balance. And this was a, if you like it, take it.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused problems in the beginning because they did not see it as equal then. It was more of a step down rather than a step towards mating.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very persistent. And eventually we began a very strong relationship. But it wasn't right. There was always an element of miscommunication because we still could not speak a language together. And she never felt like she was given what she thought she was going to be getting within her culture.
And what was that?
That dominance, that overbearing, club you and drag you into a cave mentality.
And that's what she wanted?
It was what she experienced and expected.
Mm-hmm.
And it is what they revered as true manhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused many problems.
It did.
And there were also many children born that did not make it. They would come out and they would live for a few moments and they would die.
Mm-hmm.
And it took its toll on her.
It did?
It did.
Mm-hmm. What did these children look like?
they were hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
They were, in my eyes, beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
but in their eyes, deformed,
Mm-hmm.
unnatural, unacceptable,
How did that make you feel?
horrified, because this is what I had promised as the only chance to my people,
Mm-hmm.
and it still was not working out. Finally, she left with another man
Mm-hmm.
from another tribe,
Mm-hmm.
and she was heavily pregnant with my child,
With your child? Mm-hmm.
and she didn't expect for this one to live, but I know now it did.
It did live.
It was the only one that lived,
The only one.
but I can only see that as an after perspective. I didn't know it in my life.
Mm-hmm. You didn't know it then.
No.
Mm-hmm.
And one by one, we all grew old and
Mhm.
died.
Mm-hmm. What about the rest of your crew? Did they end up creating hybrids as well?
No, I was the only one.
So only one.
They wouldn't do it. They thought it was beneath them,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no point,
Mm-hmm.
especially when they saw all of my children die, one after another.
Mm-hmm.
There was 4 of them. The 5th one was the one that made it.
Mm-hmm. What did this child look like?
It was a girl,
Mm-hmm.
and she carried heavy characteristics on my side,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems as if she was ostracized heavily by her community because of it.
Mm-hmm.
They saw her as very different, an alien.
Mm-hmm. Is that how they saw her?
Yes. But she had many children.
She did.
She did. And they had many, and they had many.
Mm-hmm.
And it all went back to that one child. But I never saw her.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw her mother again. I just watched as those others that had arrived with me, one after another, died. They just gave up hope. That was it. That was what killed them.
They gave up hope and that killed them?
One after another. Their hearts would give out. They would just lose the will to live.
Mm-hmm.
And it would happen quickly.
How did they die?
The first one was just malaise, and then its heart gave out.
Mm-hmm.
One of them jumped off a very high cliff,
Mm-hmm.
and the others created an illness within themselves that allowed for them to excuse themselves from this life.
So they created an illness?
They created illness within themselves
How did they do that?
through the general feeling of depression and hopelessness. They were able to attract illness to them very quickly, and within that, they were gone.
So by feeling depression, they could attract an illness?
It would start off very simple as something like a common cold,
Mm-hmm.
and it would escalate into a full-blown pneumonia within a week.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks into it, they would be gone,
Mm-hmm.
one after another.
What about you?
I didn't give up hope until after she left.
What happened after she left?
I went crazy.
You did. Tell me more about that.
I remember running around on these paths that they would make, and they were huge ferns the size of me, all around on either side of the path,
Mm-hmm.
and just running around thinking I could find her somewhere and I could bring her back, and just thinking I could do this. I can be a brute. I could whatever she needs. If she needs me to just knock her to the ground to make her feel that she is accepted by her society, I will do it. I will do any of it. I have nothing else. I have to find her. And it was not a deep love. It was not a love of my life situation. It was just the only thing I had left.
It was just the only thing you had left.
The only thing.
Did you ever find her?
Never.
What happened to you?
I died alone in a cave.
You died alone in a cave?
I curled up and died.
And just died? So just allow yourself to take that last breath in that lifetime and allow your soul to drift and float away, leaving that body behind. He will find peace. He will find what he is supposed to find. And now from a different perspective. Can you see that lifetime from a different perspective?
Yes.
So why did you crash?
That was the mission. Was to begin interacting with those single-celled amoebas that had evolved to that point.
So that was the mission?
We had to create it in a way where it was a hybridization between what would naturally grow and prosper and what we were bringing to the planet. Because conditions were slightly different on our planet, and we needed to create a race of people that would be able to thrive on this planet. And that was the mission, though I was the last one to realize it.
How do you feel now, looking back on this lifetime?
I accomplished my mission. It was a very difficult life, full of loneliness, and I felt like I was a failure in that life. But it was anything but looking back.
But you really weren't a failure.
It was the beginning of everything.
So that was the beginning of everything?
That was the beginning of everything. The beginning of this planet being groomed. That first baby that survived. She was the key to the success. Because if she could live, then this was not a waste. This was all validated, this experiment.
So was that the mission?
Was it an issue?
Was that the mission then?
The mission. It was.
To have this baby?
It was. It was for us to breed with them and to see if we could find viable offspring that could thrive in the conditions here.
So what happened to the race after that, after she had multiple babies who had multiple babies? How did that change the human population?
The intelligence levels rose, and with the intelligence comes advances in technology, advances in language, advances in expression, and you must have a full culmination of all of these things in order for your society to become enlightened and for them to begin to transfer into the next phase as a society. It is not something that could be done by simple-minded, uninhibited minds. Unenlightened,
Unenlightened?
I think so.
So how many times did that happen, that there was a crash? And
there were many.
so did it happen consecutively to help the population become more enlightened, or was...
When I was sent out, there were possibly up to 50 other ships that were sent out with crews all around the globe, and we all crashed in different spots in order to see what was the best place for these conditions to thrive. So a bit of a variety there to see what would be the best. And That is why you see people looking so different, but sharing some similar traits as well.
I see.